Pittsburgh Steeler fans, welcome back to another episode of the Scho Bro Show. This is Steel Curtain Network editor Dave Schofield coming at you Tuesday night, a little bit later than normal. Big Bro had some stuff going on, but hey, where else would you rather be as a Steelers fan, especially coming off the last week that we've just experienced? And with me as always, except when he's not, is my big brother Rich, Big Bro Scho. How you doing tonight?
Woo! Hey, we had a draft, and I'm not hearing a whole lot right now. Of course, folks will already put out next year's mock draft stuff now, but I'm ignoring everything mock draft wise and now just focusing on the players that the Steelers actually got in the real draft.
Yes. Now it's a real draft. It's over. We got one right in our mock draft that we did here. Didn't fall out the way that we thought that it would at all, because the big thing is the Steelers did move. They didn't move up. They didn't move back. And I feel like it worked out well for them.
I'll tell you, I loved after the draft the Tomlin and Khan press conference. And Khan talking about, hey, we looked at making moves up, but we didn't feel like giving up the capital to move up, and pretty much got what we wanted anyway, or there was too much value with what was going to be there, that it wasn't worth moving up. Great. Not a problem. Hey, the phone rang up the hook moving back. We were like, yeah, we don't really want to move back. We like the guys who we could potentially get here and things like that. So, it sounds like, Omar was both investigating and receiving phone calls, but in the end, the Steelers just stayed put and made their picks where they were slotted.
And it made sense, because I was ready for them to move up in the second round. I was ready for him to do it. I'm like, pull the trigger. You might not need to pull the trigger. The biggest fear I had after Jackson Powers Johnson went off the board was somebody else trading. And didn't someone trade up that was behind the Steelers that was a potential thing, and then they didn't go center? We'll get into that a little bit more.
I want to say it was the pick right before the Steelers.
Yeah, and was it? I was almost thinking, was it the Packers maybe jumping back up, or the Panthers, or someone who was behind them, then who was in front of them that moved back and then moved back up? I don't really care who the other teams are outside of the Steelers. Someone will probably. Reginald said it was Carolina. So I know it was a P, whether it was the Packers or Panthers. That was the one I couldn't remember. But I knew that those teams had picks right around the Steelers where they were going. And a lot of things were interesting. It didn't make sense for the Steelers to do what they did. So we're going to do a little bit of breakdown before we get into the topic of the show, which is where we're going to talk specifically about answered and unanswered questions from the Steelers draft. Things that were questions before. I don't know that there's anything that wasn't somewhat answered. Just the questions might have changed a little bit, if that makes sense. So not all of them were answered, but some of them had the questions changed a little bit. We're going to get to that probably in the middle part. We're just going to talk about our overall impressions and stuff with the draft. Lots of great feedback from people that were part of the live stream. So, back in 2020, when the Steelers didn't have a pick, we did a live stream. It wasn't exactly the same. I had computer issues. StreamYard wasn't what it is now. It's just a better platform now. And it was interesting how it went. But this was after doing the Zoom calls for the last few years. I thought we were able to do the live stream where it felt more like the Zoom call. I mean, there were times where, like, oh my goodness, especially on Saturday. I don't know. Did you get to? I knew you weren't on the stream at all on Saturday. Did you get to listen to it at all? Did you pop in at all, or might have been out of range?
No, I did for just a little bit, but not really. Not much.
That long time between the 4th round pick and the 6th round pick, I did some asking of questions and things like that. We had Roy Countryman come on. He actually got there in time for one of the Steelers picks. It was a lot of fun. And I hope that everybody else enjoyed that listened to it. That I don't know why anyone would go back and watch it later. I really don't. That was, We didn't put out the audio or anything from it, obviously, because that was something to be enjoyed in the moment. So I really hope that people enjoyed that in the moment. And I was surprised how many people were tuning into us rather than something, the draft itself, or maybe like most of us were, catching it in multiple ways. Yes. Where, I had the draft on, with no sound on and talking to you all and everything else. It was just a whole lot of fun. So did you enjoy your times when you were on?
I did. We just needed to make sure we get some of the rest of our staff to go with closed captioning while they're watching it on TV while they're on the stream then. So
yeah. Yep. You were saying, Dave, your sound's bleeding through. I'm like, dude, I'm muted. It can't be me. So I didn't.
Well, at one point in time, I muted you to see if it was you, and when I muted you, it got quiet. So there must have been a pause on the TV or something.
It must have been something like that. Yeah. So, but overall, I thought it worked really well. We tried to schedule people to make sure we had decent coverage and weren't overwhelmed for the first 2 days. And the third day, we just said to anyone on the staff, just come in when you can. And I mean, my goodness, Jeff started it off by himself while I was trying to get set up. And Roy accidentally killed the feed, had to start it over. So that was kind of funny.
That I saw.
Yes. Well, I know. Well, I had just, when Roy left, I'm like, I'm going to step out too. It was 3:00 and I hadn't had lunch yet. But then again, I was eating my breakfast whenever the draft started because I was up so late the 2 nights. I slept in Saturday and as long as I could. So I'm like, it's 3:00. If I'm going to eat anything between now and dinner, I need to go get something. So I went, got some lunch, let my daughter practice piano where it wasn't the music in the background. Because she had a recital on Sunday. And I come back and there's nothing there. I'm like, was everyone having to go and they just killed the stream? Oh no, what happened? What's going on? The Steelers still have 2 more picks. And then I went back into the lobby and realized, oh, they've got another one. And that's when I found out what happened. So it was a lot of fun. So I talked about that way too long. I just wanted to thank everybody who was involved with that and for the good feedback that we got from it. Didn't really get anything negative. People enjoyed it. Because if you didn't want it, and if you didn't want us talking about the picks as soon as we got them reported, then we were saying, then this isn't for you. Because as soon as we can get this information, we're going to talk about it.
Yep.
But man, you were on there. Were you on when the Steelers made their pick in round 1?
Yes.
I thought so. Man, I kept saying for the longest time leading up to things, I didn't want the Steelers settling for something at 20. I wanted them to have something available that I didn't expect or for them to trade back. It was the first option.
They got the guy. They got the guy we really wanted.
Yes.
You and I. That's the guy we both liked.
Yes.
And when he continued to fall and some of the other tackles went, I was just like, the team's not realized that they're leaving us the guy we actually want.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Honestly. And the thing is, the draft fell. Well, I mean, I still have my little tally marks here. I'm sitting here tallying things up because I ran these numbers. Did I run them by you? I can't remember. I ran them by several people. Of if this is what I expected to go before the Steelers.
Yes.
So if that many people went, they'd be in good shape. And
yes.
If more went, they'd be even better.
Yes.
And I was like, if 4, you got to have 4 quarterbacks go ahead of them. And there were 6. That was huge for the Steelers having more of an option. You needed 3 wide receivers to go. You needed 3 wide receivers to go ahead of them. And it got to a point where I think I stopped doing the tallies. I'm pretty sure, I had them at 3 wide receivers gone before then. Maybe it was a 4th. I'm honestly, pick 19's a bit of a blur. That was a defensive player, though, I'm pretty sure. Yes, it was. Because from the Raiders forever. Because they had the wrong phone number, which I thought was hilarious. Okay. A tight end needed to go before the Steelers. But a lot of people would have been like, if that tight end would have dropped all the way to 20, would they have passed on it? We'll never know because he didn't. It was really big that he dropped to 12, 13. 13, I'm pretty sure is where he dropped. And then when it came to the offensive line, to me, a big one was the Bengals choosing Mims.
Yes.
That was big.
I really wonder, and again, we'll never know the answer because it's not how it fell. Had the tackle that been there for the Steelers been Mims, they've taken Mims, or would they have changed course and potentially taken Mitchell or
Arnold?
Yeah,
I think it would have been Mitchell of those two.
Yes,
and that was the question I was getting ready to ask you.
Really, that's funny because that's what I thought as it fell.
It was,
but when it was the tackle that you all liked, that the Steelers liked the best. You know, there were a lot of folks that were like, "Man, there hadn't been a corner gone yet. You could have got the very best corner."
Don't get me started.
I know. Instead, you take the sixth best offensive tackle. Really? Was it the sixth best on the Steelers board? I think it was number 2. Correct.
I think
so. That's where I figured it was for the Steelers. The Steelers are probably, was the Steelers brass all sitting around as the other tackles were going, said, "Man, these teams are dumb." Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's interesting. It's interesting because, and then you had no defenders. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there needs to be 2 edge rushers go before the Steelers and a defensive tackle. And I thought 2 corners, but then there were no corners. But see, tackle or, we'll just say this. Offensive line and corner were the 2 things that I was thinking that would be good for the Steelers to have in round 1. So I wasn't wanting the corners to go. I wasn't wanting too many of the offensive line to go, but you had to have some in order to get what you're getting there. But the defensive tackle went. Edge started going. They're late where you got the edge players. It was really interesting because to me, this draft went somewhat. They were going to get someone better than what we were banking on at 20, the way things fell when the quarterbacks started to go.
Yes.
And that's why we got that inside information that if people were getting stupid over quarterbacks, the Steelers might make a move. And I still think the move they could have made is, if Rome Odunze would have dropped lower than what he did. He didn't drop low enough. But if he'd have dropped even lower, then the Steelers might have even considered making a move. But they didn't need to make these moves. I think it was hard for Omar Khan to sit there and not make the move to go get Fautanu. I think he was ready to move up to 16 or 17 to do it.
Yes. But it wasn't worth the capital he would have lost to move up if Mitchell was still going to be there and say, we got a good consolation prize for, as a corner instead of a tackle.
If where the extra 2 quarterbacks went, if those would have both been cornerbacks, and you're sitting there, basically your options are going to be, if the cornerbacks went in place of the quarterbacks, where some people thought they would, then you're sitting there, okay, you've got Fautanu, you've got Mims, who's got to be way further down the list than saying Fautanu's so high. And then you probably still have Barton as a possibility. Do they look at pulling the trigger to go ahead of the Bengals if the 2 corners would have been gone already? I think they may. That's something that they would have considered more.
Yes.
But let's say even the Rams, if they had to take Fautanu, I still think the Steelers would have been happy with what would have been left for them at 20, and it would have been we would have seen a completely different draft. Completely different drafts. But that's all speculation because it doesn't matter because the Steelers got their guy. And my thing is, the reason for me why this felt like 2020, 2021, I got to get the right year, is when Christian Darrisaw fell and went to the Vikings right before the Steelers when they took Najee Harris. If Darrisaw would have still been there, I'd have been mad about them taking Najee Harris. Once Darrisaw went the pick before them, I got it. And for people that are like, really? Look at how good he's been. I still can't believe that dude fell.
Yes.
So, but that didn't work out for them to get that tackle. But you know what? It worked out to get this one. I know we've got other draft picks to talk about, but we'll get there
Yep.
quickly. Are you worried about the shortness? Ooh, he's a quarter of an inch too
quarter of
short.
an inch short. Yeah, it's like no, because you know where he makes that up with,
Arm length.
and
Mm-hmm.
and my favorite word for offensive linemen,
Mm-hmm.
and nastiness.
Nastiness.
Arm length and nastiness makes up for the quarter of an inch that we're then talking about because the guy was wearing the wrong pair of shoes or something. You know,
And
it's like
I'll throw this out there. Some people they say, well, he might have fallen because there was concern over his knee. The Steelers were not shy about their reasoning for bringing in Fautanu for a visit. We got this information.
yep.
And I don't think it was I don't think it was a coincidence. I think it was purposeful. I think the Steelers were letting it get out there. They've had some red flags with this guy that they needed to check out.
Yep. We brought him in because we needed to bring him in the building. We needed to have our guys look at him because we needed to check on that knee.
Well, see, the thing is, I thought maybe the Steelers liked him as a center then. That was what their big questions were. But they're like, they really have some questions about Fautanu. I think I can't say that wasn't the Steelers kind of putting that out there to see if he would drop. If we get this later, I would say in 20 years, I don't think it'd be Jim Wexell writing the book, but he has the on the clock book where you get some various stories from Steelers drafts. If there's a book written 20 years from now about this draft with inside information, I would love nothing more to find out that the Steelers actually tried to say that they were having concerns so other teams would get concerned and then not draft him so the Steelers could get him. I would love for that to be true more than anything. Don't know if that was ultimately a big smokescreen by them. I can't say that it was. It definitely wasn't. That's what makes it kind of neat. So you think that could be a possibility?
It's always a possibility.
Yeah, you never know what they're going to do. Okay, so then we had the fun of round 2 with. I was
Shannon.
nervous enough.
With Shannon.
I was nervous enough being on the live stream, but I'm the one who specifically tried to get Shannon on there for when either Zach Frazier went before the Steelers picked or the Steelers made that pick.
Or the Steelers didn't make that pick.
Well, meaning made that selection whether it was Frazier or not.
Yeah.
Because I was.
If it wouldn't have been Frazier, I was prepared for an Andrew Wilbar type meltdown by Shannon White.
We talked about that. We said, Shannon, is your camera? Could you get it down to the floor? So yeah, I was the same way. And that's when we'll talk about them when we talk about these questions coming up.
Now, everybody imagine this for just a second, okay? You got to imagine this in the Shannon White twangy voice, okay? The Steelers select someone who in the second round who was not named Zach Frazier. I think what you'd have gotten from Shannon is the no.
Yeah, exactly.
But you got to imagine that in Shannon's voice, and that's like,
yep. Hey, I got to answer a quick question.
And then what are you doing?
But I would have been baffled. Okay. Because remember, when we did our mock draft, I didn't like the draft, and then we got Frazier, and then I love the draft kit. Rob Fitzoff wants to know about my hat, if anyone knows where they're sold. I actually got this from the Steelers shop. I just don't know if they have them there anymore. I don't know if they have them anymore. I've had it for a couple years. So, yeah, I really like it. It is black on black with just a single – it has the full logo. But only one of the hypocycloids is gold.
Hypocycloid that is colored.
We had to give a description for the audio side. So just had some really good stuff. Day 2 is where the draft is where you make or break the draft. You can have a good round 1, good day 1, but day 2 is where you either build on a great round 1 or recover for a sketchy round 1 or ruin a good round 1. Yeah.
day two are where GMs make their money.
Yeah.
That's that to me is moneymaker day. If you're a GM that's getting paid, you're getting paid because of what you do in day two.
Yeah, and once again, I said this somewhere else. I can't remember where. I did so many podcasts, and when I wasn't doing them, I was on the live stream. But this was so much throughout the weekend. Is every one of the day two picks, just like last year, I would have been happy if they selected him in the pick before they were selected, that the Steelers had.
Yeah,
I was one of the few people that said if they want Zach Frazier bad enough, take him at 20. If you wanted him bad enough, take him at 20. They didn't, and they got him at 51. Yeah. If the Steelers would have taken Roman Wilson as their second round pick, do you think Steelers fans would have been upset? I would have been upset because they didn't take Frazier. But honestly, if Frazier would have been taken, I wouldn't have been shocked if that was the pick.
Yeah.
Then when they did take Roman Wilson, Dad and I were also both kind of leaning towards Peyton Wilson, and they got him with the next one anyway. So really happy with all those.
Of those first four picks, in the first 2 days, the Peyton Wilson one is the one that I think in the end could come out to be the biggest steal.
Or could turn around and he could be a guy that is just never where his worst ability is his availability. I'm not banking on that. He's been good for 2 years. Some people are like, wow, he's had all those injuries and went 2 years without an injury, but maybe he's due for one. I don't know. He's one of those that it's just, even if he doesn't, even if it's a Senquez Golson situation, it was with your second, third round pick that was a compensatory pick that you picked up from somebody else.
Yep.
That's it. So if that happens, I still like what they potentially have because they could have an amazing player there. We just have to wait and see how, he's almost as much. No, I don't know. He's probably not as much of a mystery as Cole Holcomb. We'll get into that. That's another question we'll have here in the second section.
Let me ask about him. Let me ask you another question about Wilson. Does it concern you that he's missing an ACL?
Well, if he doesn't have one, he can't tear it.
There you go. Well, and then how about the fact that, when somebody brings that up, I love to say, well, you do remember.
He's not the first player that didn't have one.
You do remember Greg Lloyd is, right?
Yeah.
Greg Lloyd didn't have an ACL.
Hines Ward didn't have an ACL.
Hines Ward. He was pretty good, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Hines Ward didn't have an ACL.
Just because he doesn't have an ACL doesn't mean that he will be good, but it doesn't mean that because he doesn't have one that he can't be good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. So my thing is with him, just take it. I mean, and look at all the players they have it inside linebacker otherwise. Yes, Cole Holcomb. We don't know about him. So it's not like, oh no, he's missing a few weeks or he's got to have something done. Especially if it's this year. I'm just excited that he could be something really, really special as things progress. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Do you want to say anything? We're a little late on our break here. If you want to say anything about day three.
No, but I will say this. I liken the pick of Peyton Wilson to being kind of like the Nick Herbig pick of last year.
Except he didn't really have the injuries.
Correct.
Concerns.
But what I'm saying is it was like, hey, we get Nick Herbig. Hey, this guy could be really good. Hey, we're not necessarily going to be depending on this guy from day one.
Yeah.
But let's suppose something happened to somebody that we were. I wasn't worried about it. That's how I feel with Peyton Wilson. We're not necessarily going to be depending on that guy from day one. But let's say something happened to where we had to be. I think I'd be okay with it.
Yeah. And it's funny, like Steel Dog 88 says, he's like, Wilson and Queen could be the answer finally to our ILB issue. I don't think that's going to be the answer this season. It could be maybe later in the season, just because of the way things are. We'll talk about that a little bit.
Yep.
But it doesn't have to be in week one. That's what's great. And my goodness, don't forget Landon Roberts. He played really friggin' good last year for the Steelers when the other guys went down. And like I said, he was he was one of the biggest losses in that Cardinals game. Why that started to get away from him when they didn't have him out there. So,
hey, real quick, when it brings up, Wes says, "Hi, Wes. Good to see you out there." He says, "Okay, I ain't no doctor, but what's the complications or limitations of a player without an ACL? Normally, you'll see them wear a brace to add stability."
yeah, it holds crap together in there.
Yeah,
It's really what it does.
yes.
So, yeah.
So,
Yep. And what Afton said, I heard this as well. She says they tend to develop arthritis faster than guys with an ACL. So this is someone that's going to be there. So yeah. So there's, I think the Steelers really, I mean, just remember, not every draft pick is the answer for 2024. That's what I think. Somebody like a Peyton Wilson, he could be, but he doesn't need to be.
correct.
Okay. Mason McCormick. I keep wanting to say Mitch McCormick. I think I might even wrote that somewhere. I know it's the first name of one of the quarterbacks the Steelers had last year. We didn't call him Kenny McCormick, So it's Mason McCormick. Man, that guy. Everything I hear about him is, man, he can pull. So he's a guy that's. We'll get to something with him a little bit more. And then you have 2 6-round picks that are just guys that if they work out, great, and if not, oh well. That's kind of what they were. So, hey, we're going to go ahead and take our break. We're going to roll in so we can have some of these questions that we're going to talk about to see what kind of answers we have. So if you're with us here on YouTube, Facebook, X, we're not going anywhere. If you're with us in the audio, stick around. We'll be right back after these messages. All right, Steelers fans, let's get on with it. The title of the show was about answered and unanswered questions for the Steelers 2024 draft. Tried to give a bit of an overview, but man, I got too hung up on the first round. I'm sorry. Woo! Lots of good things to talk about. Lots of questions I think were answered, and lots of questions that I think were tweaked a little bit. Okay, you ready?
Go.
I wrote some of these down. If you come up with any, you let me know. I didn't want to make you have to do this because I knew you were busy here today. So if you think of any, let me know. But here's a couple that will happen. Okay. Here was a question about the Steelers that I had that I got answered. Will they keep investing in the trenches?
Yeah.
The answer is yeah. Now, some people would have liked them to take a defensive lineman a little bit higher. People also forget that when I did the depth chart, I was like, my goodness, I'm going to have to put Lee. There's 11 guys on the depth chart. I had him 9th. Just because, I mean, you know who I had him right behind? Listen to this. This was an article at SteelCareNetwork.com today, if you didn't know. He was right behind Braden Fajoko. The Steelers fans were like, oh, we'd like to see more of him. That's where I have him right now. That doesn't sound crazy, does it? A guy that was on the Steelers practice squad and on the roster for part of the season last year.
Right.
And that puts him 9th. Because I went by the hierarchy of where they finished the season. Fajoko finished on the practice squad. He was behind Leal because he was inactive. He was behind Loudermilk because he had a helmet. He was behind Adams because Adams was getting the playing time. I put Adams behind Dean Lowry because of his history in the NFL that the Steelers picked up. Some people forget about him. And he was the first guy after the starting 3, which I said the order of them really doesn't matter. I did them in order of age. I went Cam, Lario, and Benton. But you can say all you want to of who's actually better out of those 3. That's a deep class. So I'm like, man, they could have, you know what, in the trenches, they could have maybe gone defensive tackle higher. I mean, Lee's going to have an uphill battle to make the roster anyway. But to me, his path is clear. I said this on the day 3 wrap up. You've got to be better, a better option than Leal and Loudermilk. That's what you got to do.
Yep.
So that's who you're looking to hop. So I have him behind him now. I don't think it's very far. And honestly, I don't think Braden Fajoko's that far behind him either. I think he has the chance. I think both those players have a chance to move ahead of both of those guys. So that's really going to create some competition towards the bottom of that room, in my opinion. But if you want to see them do more trenches in 2025 draft, maybe it's defensive tackle that goes high that time. That'll be interesting. So that was a question. Here's one that I don't think was answered, but I think we got a big part of the equation. Are you ready?
Yes.
What's the plan at center? I think we got a big part of it. I'm just not convinced that we got everything.
Correct. Not sure we got, as Regis Philbin would say, the final answer.
Yes.
Final answer?
Because
Not sure. It could be. Could be the final answer. But not sure that we don't know the final answer yet. We might feel a lot better about what the final answer might be.
yeah, and I know people are going to like it because especially like what Wes just said, because he says Frazier starts day one. That would not shock me at all.
No.
But to me, I don't think that's their plan. And people will hate it. This is the time of year that people hate it, that you point out, the Steelers aren't guys that are playing a position that you're either on the field all the time or you're not, probably aren't going to go on the field the first few weeks. Broderick Jones didn't. Joey Porter Jr. barely saw the field. Okay. Keanu Benton ended up in there because of Cam Hayward getting hurt. He ended up getting more playing time. Okay. You got Washington on the field a little bit, but he wasn't getting any targets, but that didn't change by the end of the season. Right. So my thing is, I don't think it's their plan to have him being the only option at center for when they head to OTAs, training camp, all that stuff. And it might be somebody else already on the roster.
Correct. Now, what I think, and if Wes is sitting there thinking about that in this way, this is where I understand it. I think that there is a good chance that by the time you work your way through camp and the preseason, that Frazier could basically say or make it clear that he is the option.
Yes. And the thing is, and like Brent House says, who starts if Frazier doesn't?
I don't know.
If you would have saw my article yesterday with the depth chart, there's 2 players at center on the depth chart, him and McCullough. So the thing is, the other options are somebody else that plays other things. Is it Anderson? Is it Herbig? Are they wanting to move? Are they thinking about Daniels? Like I said, he's actually got the most NFL experience at center out of everybody, but it wasn't since 2019. I don't know if I like that idea either. But my point is, they have something else in mind, but it might not have been a great option. And Frazier could prove to be the better option. I just don't see the Steelers going into training camp with Frazier as the only option.
The only option, correct.
So I still think he very well should be their best option. But I said it in, what year was that? In 2021. I didn't want Kendrick Green to get the starting center job by default. He needed to earn it and show that he was so much better than everybody else, not just their only option of some not so good options. And that's why I'm leery of that a little bit. I don't think it's answered yet, because here's the other option. You can't go with just Frazier's your only option. What's your backup?
Right.
Even if Frazier is the guy, you've got to have a viable backup. What if something happens? What if he goes down? So that's why I don't think you have all the answers yet. It's not that the answers aren't on the team. Because in case you all were wondering, Brian Allen, the center that Bad and other people liked, he signed with the Browns. Or at least it's reported he was signing with the Browns.
I hate to do this to you, but I got to duck and take a phone call real quick.
Yep, I know you got work. Okay. You got to work things, so that's okay. I'm going to keep going. Maybe we can get
all
there.
Right. Okay? I'll get back to you in a second.
So I'm not even saying they have to add to the roster. I'm just saying we don't know what the answer is, but it can't be 100% Frazier. Even if the Steelers are comfortable starting him the very first snap of the very first week, he still can't be the only option. So we don't have all the answers there. And like I said, that answer still might be on the team. We just don't know who it is. I just find that interesting. I'm going to bring up one here while Rich isn't here. because I don't know that he wants to get in this. I had the question because this was kind of a little bit of a fear that I had, and that was because of how the reports are how much the Steelers think of him. Is Dan Moore Jr. their guy in 2024 and beyond? Because my question was, no joke, I was wondering if the Steelers don't address offensive tackle in this draft, or as I would say it, I wanted them to go big or go home. If they don't do it very high, don't need another Dan Moore. Need another Broderick Jones. To me, the Steelers got another Broderick Jones. Got a first-round investment at the tackle position. But if they didn't do that, then I had to actually ask, because he's going into the last year of his deal, were the Steelers going to extend him? Which now I think the answer is no. So to me, I like that there was more of an answer. You don't invest another first-round pick in a tackle for somebody that you're going to then pay starter money for. I don't care if they invest in Dan Moore to be their backup, their third tackle for the future. And to me, if they do that, they're not going to do it this offseason. They would just wait until his contract is done and then try to sign. Like they did with Chooks. He didn't get a deal before his deal was done. They signed him the next year before he became a free agent. Something like that, but to be the third tackle. That's a whole different story. But my question was he going to be the guy? If the Steelers didn't address anything at tackle, does that tell us more that they really wanted more Dan Moore? That answered that question for me. And some people are like, oh, Dan Moore, you could trade him. I know Roy Countryman says he might get cut. I don't know about that. There's value there. There's value there. And it's the same thing that I said, although it didn't work out this way. And Steelers fans were really all up in arms. And I said this, why do you keep mentioning Levi Wallace? I did not want Levi Wallace as the Steelers' second cornerback. I wanted him as their fourth cornerback. If you have someone that was the level of what your number 2 cornerback was last year, now is your number 4, you're that much better. And that's the thing with Dan Moore. You might not like, he's what I would say a below average offensive tackle. He's not as bad as most people make him out to be, but he's below average. If that's your third option, that's a pretty good safety net. So there's that one. All right. Here is one that I thought was interesting, that I wanted to know if the Steelers, a question I had, were the Steelers willing to give high draft capital and to trade for a player, an established veteran player? And the answer was mostly answered, not 2024 capital. They didn't trade their players to go get anyone. If they make a trade now for anything, it's going to be for 2025 draft capital. So that's interesting. So that one, I feel like it, which went along with another one I should have included together. So will the Steelers sacrifice the future to make the team better now? Which is still a question of going forward. Now are the Steelers willing to trade 2025 draft capital if they want to add another player now, which they still could do. The Steelers are active. That doesn't mean that they're not going to overpay for anything. Just because the Steelers are looking into things and those things don't work out doesn't mean they weren't looking into them. So there's that. And it seemed like, so many things on social media we got from our inside source that the Steelers were being quite active in adding to their roster. Then some people were really presuming it was the Cortland Sutton. Now that seems to have died down a little bit, but that's just kind of what it was. So, Rich, I answered a question about Dan Moore while you were gone about is he their guy for 2024 and beyond? And I think our answer there were now no. So, and then I said about they didn't give up their draft capital for a veteran. Here are the two that I think are big. Do the Steelers have enough at wide receiver?
I don't know. The question is do the Steelers think they have enough at wide receiver? So, which I'll bring it because they popped it in there right as you were asking it was.
Yep.
Steel Dog AA says, I still think Tyler Boyd's available.
He could be.
He could be. Is it an option? It is if the Steelers feel they need that option.
Yeah.
if the Steelers are okay with what they have, we as fans may question, think they don't have enough, or there's something still to be done there. But in the end, we don't make that final decision. Now they could say, "Hey, we're good," and we may not be happy with it. Right? Guess what? We're going to have to ride with it. Now, by the end of the season, we can be like, "See, I told you,"
Yeah.
or we might be like, "Oh, they were good."
Yeah.
That's one of those that we wouldn't find out the answer to until later. But right now, I don't know. In my opinion, I don't know that the wide receiver room is set.
Yeah.
But I'm not the Steelers, brass that would make that decision.
Yeah, because to me, and I've said before, they lost so much production and didn't gain it back. But that was before the draft. When you add a higher draft pick and a player like you do, then you can talk about how the rookie can take on some of that. But my question is, because people keep asking me, and I don't know, they're like, well, how many 3 wide receiver sets are the Steelers going to use?
Correct.
How often are they going to go 4 wide? If that's not something they're going to use very often, then do they really need to highly invest in it when you have other guys? My thing is Van Jefferson even what you got out of Allen Robinson last year? I was thinking of the defensive side of the ball. Wrong guy. Okay. Is it even what you got out of the word? I knew Allen was in there somewhere. What you got out of Allen Robinson last year as a number 3? Is Roman Wilson ready to be that number 2? Is there really anybody else that could be? Are the Steelers going to utilize it enough that you need to make that investment? To me, if they make the investment, that answers they go out and get somebody else. That answers the question better of how they're going to utilize wide receivers.
Right. Does it turn into more, hey, we're going to have a lot more 2 tight end sets? And does Mount Washington, reap the benefit of the Arthur Smith offense? We don't know yet, but that, believe it or not, could be an answer to have a Pat Freiermuth and then a Darnell Washington, and suddenly it's hey, we're going to pick up some of that lost production by getting more production out of our tight ends.
Yeah. Yes, which is true, but at the same time, you've got to have something other than George Pickens.
Correct.
And I just people have, it seems like Calvin Austin III has just been completely written off, but that's also because you don't know that he's an answer either. But the Steelers know so much more what they have in him than what we do. Because was he someone that they could have and should have utilized more, but Matt Canada didn't really have it, and it was too hard to try to get something going more for him
Canada
in the
only
post
saw
Matt
him
Canada?
Yeah. What was he only being looked at as a gadget guy going into last year, and it was just too tough to try to get more for him once Canada was no longer in the picture? Maybe not.
Yeah. So I still think there's more questions at wide receiver. And we'll just see what the Steelers have in mind. I would not be shocked if they add somebody else, and they could add someone else very significant. Exactly who, exactly when, is a good question. And I get it if it doesn't happen at all, then to me that tells you more what they have in mind with less use of wide receivers. But I don't know that you can get away with that too much. Well, one last question that I had, because this is the big one. What's the plan at cornerback? That one didn't really get answered as much, other than I think the plan is the Steelers have more work to do with adding to the roster.
Yes, and there are so many different routes that could go.
Yeah.
There really are. There's that one doesn't worry me as much because there's so many different ways the Steelers could look at it and address that room. I think that's an easier one to address than the wide receiver room.
Well, and I was saying it during the live stream because there was plenty of people that were saying I'm upset that they didn't draft Mitchell over. I like Fautanu, but they should have needed or they should have gone with the corner. Yeah, they do need more corner, but honestly, replacing or not replacing, putting someone in the cornerback room that's ahead of the players they have there now is a whole lot more doable in free agency than it would have been to add a tackle that would have been a replacement,
correct,
an eventual replacement for Dan Moore Jr. You just couldn't do that. So that's why, but that's not why I said you take tackle over corner. I say you take the best player that you have on your board, and they had that as Fautanu. If it had ended up being one of the corners, I would not have been upset about that at all. But I'm also not upset that they didn't go corner because it was a bigger need. When you reach for the need they were both positions of need. But when you start reaching for the position of a higher need is when you end up not having your best draft. Now, I still think they would have had a good draft if it just would have been very different if they would have gone with cornerback there. But listen to this cornerback room. I just have this here because I was looking at the depth chart. I ended up having to put Ryan Watts in the cornerback room. I don't think he's in the cornerback room for the Steelers. I think he's safety. Based on him being mainly a zone guy, the Steelers really need that right now out of their safety and sub-package stuff there than they do more as corner. But the reason I put him as corner is because the Steelers list him as a defensive back, and all their other defensive backs on Steelers.com were cornerbacks. So I just felt I shouldn't go out of my way to change it yet. But I gave that full disclaimer when I did the article. But listen to this. Listen to this depth chart. You ready? Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, Josiah Scott. You know who Josiah Scott is?
The son of Mrs. Scott.
Yeah. I'm just saying I can't even remember who he's played for. He has several years of experience that the Steelers picked him up late last year. But that's your third cornerback right now. And I would be shocked if anybody without cheating could tell me what number he wears. Like Afton says. Doesn't even sound familiar. Yeah. So that's just one of those things. It's like, what are you doing? There's more coming here.
Oh, yeah.
Even if it's just more depth. Even if it's just, Patrick Peterson. Because after Josiah Scott, that's what it goes. Darius Rush, Corey Trice, Luke Barkoo. Then I put Ryan Watts there because, he could be a sub-package corner, but you could call him a sub-package safety. That's why defensive back is a good title for him. And the reason I put Rush ahead of Trice is because he at least dressed for a game for the Steelers last year. Then there's a couple other guys that have some NFL experience, Thomas Graham Jr., Kalen Barnes, and then the undrafted free agent Beanie Bishop out of West Virginia, who I think could surprise and find his way on the roster and eventually be something that would work for Steelers and sub packages after listening to Shannon talk and everything, or he could be nothing. But what I'm saying is that dude could jump all the way up to the number 3 cornerback because it's not a big jump. He's an undrafted free agent.
Right. But there's still a lot out there the Steelers could do with that position.
Yeah, and the thing is, I've never paid attention to, or really, I've never even gone back to watch film to see a snap that I can remember of Dante Jackson, who the Steelers got for Deontay Johnson. I really know. All I know is he didn't have any interceptions last year. I think he had 5 passes defense, but played a ton of snaps. So I don't know if they were avoiding him. I don't think that was the case because I thought I saw a decent number of touchdowns surrendered. But maybe he will be really good for the Steelers. But right now, looking at that depth chart, he's got to be. He's got to be, or they've still got to be making a significant move, which I think would be – that's the number one thing if the Steelers could only add one more player from free agency, if the rules were you can only add one more, and you had to pick the position, I'm picking cornerback.
Potentially. I think you have to, if that were the case, you'd be treating it the same way you'd treat your draft in terms of having your players ranked out there and then seeing who would fall to you.
Yeah.
And so then it would be a suppose then that you had I'll just throw this out there, that you had Tyler Boyd ranked higher than, I don't know, give me a corner that they could go get,
Stephon Gilmore.
There you go. Okay, let's suppose you had that you had him ranked higher. Well, then when it got to you, you'd be like, okay, they're both positions of need. Take the higher ranked player.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way, so it really doesn't matter.
No. So yeah, it's tricky.
I'm kind of like you in the fact that both those rooms could use a little work. I'm going to use the word potentially because the word potentially here means knowing which one would need more work. I think the Steelers have a better idea of which one that is over us.
Yeah. Because
the Steelers know things like, what do they think of Corey Trice and where is he in his rehab?
Yeah.
The Steelers know, okay, is Calvin Austin kind of a bust? Is he a one-trick pony, or were we just not utilizing him correctly?
Yeah.
They have or have a better grasp on the answers to those questions that we don't know the answer to.
Yeah. Yep. And who knows, if those young guys work out really well, it just doesn't seem like a very Steelers thing to do is to go into this season saying, oh, well, we just need a couple of these young guys to work out well and we'll be fine.
Right.
That just doesn't, Steeler fans think, oh, I think it's going to be Corey Trice. The Steelers would be bonkers to think that Corey Trice is going to be your answer at cornerback as a 7th round draft pick from last year that got hurt on the first day of contact in training camp and you haven't seen since. That would be bat crap crazy.
Yes.
To think that's the case. Now, doesn't mean that he can't do it. Just that'd be like banking on an undrafted free agent that had that. So
I got to duck again real quick. I'll be back.
Yep, that's all right. Hey, we'll see if we're still here because I was going to bring up one question here that I want to say, and this is from Two Girls, One Stanley Cup. It says, Dave Schofield, why did the UDFA quarterback get such a high signing bonus from the Steelers? I'll be honest with you, from where I get all my official salary cap information, I don't have any information on any signing bonuses of the undrafted free agents. So if that's out there from a reliable source, one, I'd be surprised I didn't see it. So I don't know how reliable it is. I mean, it could be, but that is not something that I've seen. And plus, I'm not convinced he's a quarterback because the Steelers did not put a position on him on Steelers.com. He actually played wide receiver when he was at Ole Miss. So did they draft him as their 4th quarterback or did they draft him as a wide receiver? Not draft him or pick him up. Either way, I'm not really concerned about it. And I don't know what a high signing bonus is. So we'll just have to see. But so if we'll see how that works out. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and take the break. When we come back, we're going to go ahead and do the big question. That's really about all that we have left because Rich isn't here, so we're not going to do our five minutes of non-Steelers talk. We'll make sure we get back to that next week. So stick around. We'll be right back. All right, Steelers fans, here we go. You should know the big question. The big question is actually a slight variation. I gotta actually be able to spell it right to put in the live chat. It's a slight variation from 2 weeks ago when we did our mock draft. Where to remind you, in our mock draft, we took Cooper DeJean at 29, Zach Frazier at 51, which was correct, Xavier Leggett at 61. We were arguing between Leggett and Pearsall, who to take at 61, and they ended up going 31 and 32. We took the offensive tackle from Yale that I can't say his name. We took Tavondre Sweat at 98, which he went way sooner than that. Kalen King from Penn State. I can't remember where he went off the board, but it was after that. Then we had Tyler Davis, a bunch of people that the Steelers didn't get. The only one we had was Zach Frazier. But now the question is, so Rich is back, so I can ask you this question for the big question. Out of the Steelers' 7 selections, I think we're going to get a lot of a couple different answers. Which one was your favorite pick?
All right. Oh man, I'll tell you, it comes down to the first 2. And for me, then it's trying to figure out, okay, which one is my favorite. I'm actually going to go with.
Remember, don't answer yet in the live chat. We won't bring it up. There.
So I'm actually going to go with Fuatanu, but just like, again, I'm going to use that word, just like the level of nastiness that he brings. Mm-hmm. But that's also the reason why I kind of like Frazier, just that overall nastiness and toughness. But so honestly, I don't think you could go wrong with picking either one of the 2. But I'm going to go ahead and go with the number 1 guy, because part of the reason I'm going with him too is because I felt the Steelers had him ranked very high as a tackle, potentially at number 2, and we were still able to get him at pick 20.
Reports show the Steelers had him in the top 10 of their board, and they got him at 20. That's crazy value. That's crazy value. It really is. And they didn't have to trade up for him. That one's great. But guess what? You know what mine's going to be. Mine's going to be the same answer that I had 2 weeks ago for our favorite pick of our mock draft. And that was actually getting Zach Frazier at 51. There were so many times where he was not supposed to be there at that pick that the Steelers wanted him. They had to go get him. And they didn't have to. And if that wouldn't have worked out, I'm sure Omar Khan would have been mad at whoever was telling him, don't trade. But there's a lot of picks I really like. But to me, that was one, because when you got that pick there, then it made sense that you didn't have to go center in round 1. You got the guy that was probably better for you in the long run for the Steelers, and you got him there, and you didn't have to give up anything to go get him. That was just big. So I just put it out there. It's there now. We'll bring everyone's favorite pick by the Steelers in the 2024 NFL Draft.
And Dave, I did want to say I like your reasoning for also too behind why you went with Frazier. Just the fact that we were still able to get him at 51 makes it part of what makes that pick so special.
They could have taken him at 20, and he probably would have been my favorite pick still.
So even
though people were like, "Oh, that's way too early," you know what? If you need him that bad, then get him. And they needed him bad, and they were patient, and they got him. So here we go. Steel Dog 88 says Zach Frazier at 51. Rob Thitoff says Frazier. Steelers Pittsburgh says Frazier. David Poe says Frazier without moving up. Okay. George OTJ gave us 2 answers. Cheater, Frazier, and then Fautano right behind. Okay. Thought I already saw him, but no, that didn't. Thomas Riley says Frazier, the Steelers needed a real center. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You could argue about who was going to be better. Frazier is the one of the top tier centers that had the most experience recently.
Yes.
So he's been playing center and been playing center for a while. Okay. Powers Johnson was for a year. Graham Barton was for a year 3 years ago. You know, Van Pran Granger did too, but he was considered down a little bit more for most people. He actually wasn't even the next center off the board. It was the one from Wisconsin. Okay. Thanks, Mean Joe. He says Troy Fautanu. He says he's a Tomlin goon. Okay. Afton Ford, you went with badge choice. Peyton Wilson as your second, third round pick. Like I said, I'd have been happy with him as the first third round pick. And they got him the second one. Okay.
Yeah, he was up there pretty high for me as well.
Yeah. I love this answer. John C. says Wilson.
Yeah.
That's how you get away with making 2 picks. Okay. John Malesko if I said that right. He says practicality wise is Frazier, but potential wise is Peyton Wilson. Okay, that's why Demetrios says that Frazier and Peyton Wilson tied for him. Okay, that makes sense. Steeler Chick 46, McCormick. We didn't talk much about him with the way everything went. You didn't see guard as a big need. But then I pointed out how the Steelers have called on their fourth-round offensive lineman to get to play significant playing time. Maybe not right away. But, man, that does solidify something. That's why some people say, well, maybe James Daniels was the thought to slide into center. Because then you have options there, too. I don't know. There's a lot of things that they could be doing.
Yep.
So, but I like that. I like him, too. I think he's a guy that is a great pick, especially to develop and then have ready for the next year as well. Let's see. Wes says this is not my answer, so I had to not do it. Ted Jones says Frazier. Valley Ford says Roman Wilson. Brent Howell says Frazier. No one you know says Frazier and Peyton. People are cheating, taking two. Harvey Stone says Frazier. Is that Rico or Recco? Parson. I don't know.
I don't know.
Either way, I got it right with one of the ways. So he said Roman Wilson. Okay, which I think could be excited. See, Reginald Rivers says Frazier. Gabriel Golden says Frazier. Okay. Wes says this must be his answer because he didn't say it wasn't. Says love the first two picks, but Peyton Wilson. Okay, it's just a steal to get him where he is. Just like Dennis Pavlak says, Peyton Wilson is a steal if healthy.
Yes.
Okay. Robert Armstrong Sr. See, that was another question I meant to ask, and I didn't have it written down. He said, I really like the McCormick pick. Daniels will be moving on most likely. Because my question was, is James Daniels getting an extension this offseason? It's James, drop down that cap hit, everything else. To me, that's now a question that got fuzzier based on the draft. So we'll
yes,
see.
It did.
Matthew Baum says Peyton, he was like 40 picks off projected. That's true. Did we do George OTJ yet? That sound like both the third rounders. I don't know about Ted Jones if I did that or not. He said keep an eye on McCormick. Now people are just getting a lot of their comments in. I don't know if I have any here that's actually okay. Hey, so is it Recco? Because if it was Rico, we would have said REE. So I think it's Recco. I don't know. Maybe I still messed it up. Okay.
Is
a lot
it
of people.
Mm-hmm. Is it Recco like Greco or Rico like Rico?
So, all right. So it looks like we got them all. That of people in the live chat with their answers. I love this draft. You can throw out grades all you want, but as I say, the grades really don't matter for at least 2 seasons. That's what really matters. You can throw them out; they can make you feel good now, but you can have a great pick that just, something happens, something goes wrong. It's not the right fit. There's an injury. There's something else, but you like what the Steelers were doing, and I can see why people were still concerned about corner, because when you look at that depth chart, it's concerning. So, but I still like what they did, and I still think there's more coming. I really do. I think there's more coming. I think there's still free agents out there to be had, and it might even be a while till that happens. But I don't be shocked. To me, the question isn't if the Steelers will add another cornerback; it's how many. That's
right.
That's my question. So,
yep.
All right. Make sure you're checking out all our podcasts. We're back to our normal schedule with those after a very busy draft weekend. I hope you all enjoyed the coverage there. We talked about that early on, especially the live streams. And make sure you're checking out steelcurtainnetwork.com. Still have lots of breakdown coming for you there. Rich, what do you want to say here to close us out tonight?
The draft is over. It makes me very happy. But at the same time, it's over, but all that really does is transition us to the next thing. And that's starting to look at those guys and start to see the things they're doing to become, air quotes, true Steelers.
Yes.
But really what it does is it just keeps progressing us through the off season. We'll be talking about rookie mini camps and OTAs and things like that. Which, as we see those things with these new players, will give us even more to talk about.
And the schedule.
That
We'll
correct.
get the schedule in a couple weeks.
Correct. So, to me, it's just the draft is just a big thing for me, because the draft for me is when we go into what I really consider. I don't know if I'm going to call it that midway point of the offseason, but I call it kind of that tipping point of the offseason. The season ends, and you have all these things that happen, and it kind of crescendos, the draft, and now we have all these new players. And to me, then, we start the slide, believe it or not, with little things to training camp, which, of course, is when I get really excited. So, we're going to have a lot of to talk about over the next few weeks as we talk about, adding these guys in and what they bring. We'll still be talking position, potential position battles and things like that. And it's fantastic, because it's back to really talking, in my mind, X's and O's, and not just potential of what the Steelers could have or what their roster might be. That's maybe why I hate mock drafts so much. It's because I don't want to talk about what the Steelers
what
Steelers could be. I want to talk about, okay, this is what the Steelers have. And that's what we're getting into now. And it's just, part of that next step. And each step we take just brings me one step closer to back to Steeler football. Can't wait.